It was a brand new model called the Boeing 737 MAX 8.
They didn't understand the danger that they were walking into.
Pull up. Pull up.
The plane had flown into the sea, at full speed.
The passengers would, of course, been hysterical. Computers, laptops, phones would have been flying around.
You can tell how violent that impact was.
People shouldn't innocently buy an airplane ticket and then be in a flying coffin.
Boeing had installed a flight control system on the 737 MAX that had the power to take control of the plane from the pilots without them even knowing about it.
They're turning the pages to find out what the hell it is.
Was given the power to try to kill them, essentially, until it finally succeeded.
Will passengers be willing to fly again on its troubled MAX plane?
346 people died. Can you answer a few questions here about that?
On a sunny March morning in Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, a truly remarkable group of passengers converged on Bola International Airport. 149 passengers from 35 different countries around the world got ready to board Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, heading off to Nairobi.
It was seemingly just packed with people who are on goodwill missions of various kinds. There was a big environmental conference happening in Nairobi, a UN environmental conference.
Amongst the 149 passengers were also 9 Ethiopians, and one of them was Tamru Mulu, who is a child protection advocate.
He was a kind of person who's really passionate about life, especially children who are suffering from conflict, drought.
Also on that Ethiopian Airlines flight were 8 Americans, including 24-year-old Samia Stumo, who was raised on a Massachusetts farm by a family with a very strong tradition of activism. Samia had just started work for ThinkWell, which is a global healthcare organization.
This was her first assignment. She was going to East Africa. She, at 24, had impressed them that they sent her instead of someone, a dozen years her senior.
But not everyone on that flight was on a goodwill mission. There were also 2 brothers from California, Melvin and Bennett Riffle, on one last adventure together because Melvin was about to become a new father.
Tell me how big this was for these 2 brothers to do this together. That was pretty remarkable.
I thought so. I mean,
No, I think so too.
Yeah.
I think it's rare that 2 brothers their age would stay close enough to want to travel with each other like that.
Also on Ethiopian Air 302 that morning, a young Russian couple on vacation, Alexander Polyakov and his wife, Ekaterina.
Они очень любили путешествовать. У них мечта была сразу, но они перво-наперво, как они хотели именно поехать в этот национальный парк в Кению, чтобы увидеть крупных кошек.
And as they got ready to board, Ekaterina posted this cell phone video on Instagram of their plane outside that was waiting for them.
In general, very few people think much about the model of the plane that they're on. It's something that most people really don't think twice about.
In fact, it was a brand new model welcomed into the Ethiopian Airlines fleet with a lot of ceremony just months earlier called...
We are welcoming the state-of-the-art modern airplane, the 737 MAX 8.
It was a groundbreaking move for Ethiopian Airlines to acquire this aircraft. fact that it was new, the fact that it uses the latest technology.
Boeing had had a track record of success, and all expectations at the time were that the MAX would just be, the next big thing for the company.
But it turns out this brand new plane had a secret, unknown even to the pilots. And when it was revealed, it would not just impact Boeing in shocking and unforeseen ways, but the entire air traveling community worldwide.
Boeing is an iconic American company. They're known as the king of the sky. This is a company that's at the heart of American engineering and American manufacturing.
For Captain Sully, celebrated for successfully landing his crippled plane on New York's Hudson River, Boeing has long been the gold standard for passenger aircraft.
Boeing had a century-long history of engineering excellence, an effective culture, good leadership.
There's a saying, and it stands today: if it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. It's affirmation that Boeing has had our back for decades.
7 launches in 1958, and right off the bat, it is a huge success for Boeing. And it just so happens to be the same year that Frank Sinatra released
Desirable, and it was glamorous.
Air travel became sort of the vogue.
People would dress up to travel. Meals and flights were not a joke, something that people might look forward to.
The 1960s were an extraordinary period for the company because of the 7 series of planes.
707 was the first successful jet. And the 737 came.
And then they would do the 747, the so-called Queen of the Skies, the first jumbo jet. Boeing, from that point forward, was the premier maker of passenger aircraft.
By the 1980s, Boeing is unmatched in terms of its power, its reach, and those 700s planes are it.
The company was so important to our country's economy, in part because it was the largest exporter in the world.
They manufacture Air Force One. I don't think you can get kind of any bigger than that.
But by the 1990s, Boeing started to face truly stiff competition from this European consortium called Airbus. But up until that point, Boeing hadn't really taken them all that seriously. But suddenly, they're up and coming.
They've really accelerated to become the only other, at this point, major global competitor to Boeing for commercial aircraft.
In late 2010, Airbus comes out with this new model that really shakes up the industry and puts serious pressure on Boeing to innovate.
The A320neo, a single-aisle aircraft that had new, more fuel-efficient engines that could fly farther and for cheaper.
People want to fly direct, and to do that, you need smaller, more efficient planes.
Boeing was focused on the wide-body world. Airbus beat them to the chase.
The A320neo. Damned if they didn't wind up becoming their fastest-selling airliner. And then Boeing's like, well, wait, what are we going to do?
Boeing comes up with what they think is this really smart plan. Instead of developing an entirely new plane to catch up with Airbus, they decide to take a shortcut and revamp a model that's already on the market, saving them a lot of extra time and money.
That's when they said, okay, we can take another look at the next iteration of 737.
There were new engines, larger, more fuel-efficient engines being added to this aircraft.
Boeing calls this new model the 737 MAX, and they promise they're going to fly more people, it'll cost less money, use less fuel, and cost a lot less to operate.
United Airlines says it has cut a new deal with Boeing to build 150 737s for its fleet over the next 10 years, giving the aircraft manufacturer a leg up against its main competitor, Airbus.
The Boeing 737 MAX was the fastest-selling airliner in Boeing history. Another ball out of the park for Boeing commercial aircraft.
You've got United and American and Southwest all lining up to buy it, along with 70 other buyers around the world.
One of the big customers early on was a young budget carrier in Indonesia called Lion Air. It was a huge deal.
Tonight's Money Matters, Boeing has finalized its biggest sale ever, a $22 billion order from Lion Air of Indonesia.
The 737 MAX 8 had been flying for 17 months without any incident, but then in October of 2018, suddenly, out of the blue, an alarming problem developed with one of Lion Air's brand new MAX planes.
They don't realize that there's something in it that could potentially be hazardous and something that pilots and co-pilots are not familiar with.
All of us are screaming like we are in a roller coaster. To be honest, I think this is my last flight and this is my last day.
Is the capital, the largest city. The aviation industry was booming, especially with the increase of the middle class in Indonesia.
One of the airlines that benefited from that boom in air travel is Lion Air, an aggressive, rapidly growing budget Indonesian air carrier. In 2011, Lion Air made a huge splash buying more than 200 of Boeing's 737 MAX 8 planes.
Even the signing was overseen by then U.S. President Barack Obama.
So I want to congratulate Lion Air for their incredible success.
One of the Lion Air pilots chosen to fly the new 737 MAX was 31-year-old Bhavya Saneja. He's an Indian national whose dreams of being a pilot started when he was just a child. So can you tell me about your son?
Yes, Bob, my son was a gifted child, a blessed child. I was into aviation, and for an aviator, when the child is flying and he becomes a commander, it is a big thing, you know, it is the sort of pinnacle of your dreams.
Even though her son had over 6,000 hours of flight experience, Sangeeta says she was really concerned after learning that he wouldn't be going through pilot simulator training for the MAX.
I said, you haven't had a simulator training, how can you go for MAX? And it is a more powerful engine. So without a simulator, how will you manage?
One of the core selling points for Boeing of the 737 MAX was you don't need pilot training in the simulator.
They were selling this to airlines as essentially just another 737, that the airline pilots could fly without learning all that much new.
It's a huge deal to not have to have simulator training for pilots for any airline. It costs money and time. It takes the pilot off of the line and flying passengers around.
Lion Air had asked Boeing about simulator training for their pilots, and Boeing dissuaded them from this.
Now, according to internal Boeing documents, one of their employees ridiculed the request in a message to a colleague saying, now, Lion Air might need a sim to fly the MAX, and maybe because of their own stupidity, I'm scrambling, trying to figure out how to unscrew this now. Idiots.
Well, they were mocking them because if Lion Air required simulator training, then other airlines would say, well, wait a minute. If they're requiring it, maybe we need it. Then the whole house of cards would start to fall apart.
He said, Mom, I've been given ground training. They have given me a training on iPad. I said, what, an iPad?
So he would sit down with an iPad course, and I think there were 3 or 4 parts, and it went through a robotic voice describing what the MAX is about.
The 737 MAX has a 69-inch fan.
Did you see anything in it that looks, wow, that's substantial, we should probably do more training?
It seemed to be enough.
He trusted Boeing blindly, and that trust, you know, gave him immense confidence. He was empowered.
In October of 2018, Lion Air had a handful of the new 737 MAXes in its fleet, and one of the aircraft was going to be departing from Bali with the crew and passengers.
Me and my colleague in office, we went to Bali about October 2018. Bali is amazing for holiday, especially in Asia.
Lion Air flight JT043 was scheduled to take off from Bali to Jakarta.
The flight was quite full of passengers, and most of them are local or domestic tourists like me. It's around 7 or 10 minutes after the takeoff, the flight suddenly feels like a fall down.
It was a dive, a steep drop, 200 feet, and it wasn't something that was just caused by turbulence.
All of us are screaming like we are in a roller coaster.
How many times did it go up and down?
Up and down 4 times.
4 times?
Yes, the flight attendant who was sitting in the back, they could feel it up and down in extreme way.
When an aircraft is pitching aggressively downward like this aircraft was, and it may feel as if your stomach is coming up into your throat, basically, but then comes the positive G's. It'll squash you down into your seat.
To be honest, I think it's almost like this is my last flight and this is my last day.
It just so happened there was a third pilot traveling on the plane, and he steps in and helps them get control of the situation.
Until it's landed to the airport, I can hear everyone like say, so relief. Some of the passengers are Muslim. I can hear that say, Alhamdulillah, thanks God. I cannot say it in a word. It's really relief. Yeah, I still feel a little bit shaky until now about that.
The pilots were able to control it. They knew they had a problem, but they didn't understand exactly what the nature of the problem was.
After the flight successfully landed in Jakarta, the pilots logged that they had had some issues, but they left a lot of gaps in understanding what had happened on that flight.
That left the next crew in the dark about potential problems with the aircraft.
The very next day, Captain Suneja is assigned to an early morning flight out of Jakarta on that same 737 MAX, but he was given an incomplete report about what happened to that plane the previous night.
These are 2 different flights, but the same exact plane. So it's something that spells disaster.
On the early morning of October 29, 2018, at the airport in Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, Lion Air Flight 610 was getting ready to take off. Its destination was the city of Pangkal Pinang, which is located on the Indonesian island of Bangka.
There was 189 people on board, 181 passengers, 2 pilots, and 6 crew members.
One of the passengers was Miss Fiona Ayuzen. She was a businesswoman, 29 years old. She was flying back to Bangka for work.
Bawain kopi ya Pak, gitu. Karena saya suka kopi Bangka.
Pas pulang ke rumah, Mama bilang sekolah yang bener, terus dikasih uang jajan. Terus kalau besok paginya udah nggak ngeliat, soalnya udah berangkat duluan mamanya.
There was also another passenger by the name of Fendi Cristanto. He was flying to Bangka on a business trip and also on a personal trip. His father just passed away.
Karena dia mau mengikuti sembahyang bersama dengan keluarganya untuk sembahyang orang tuanya. Pulang mau ngikutin sembahyang yang ke-21 hari.
One of the passengers shot some video as they were boarding the flight. No one on board, including the pilots, had any idea that this very same plane suffered a near catastrophe in the air just the previous day. And on that video, you can see the brand new 737 MAX out the window.
Lion Air Flight 610 on that same 737 MAX is taking off from Jakarta. Very shortly after the flight takes off, the pilots are struggling with the plane.
The stick shaker pops off. It is loud and it is rattling in the captain's hands. There are a cacophony, a tidal wave of other distracting alerts. Airspeed disagree, altitude disagreed.
Pull up, pull up.
Just 10 minutes later, around 6:30 in the morning, a tugboat captain was out on the Java Sea, just east of Jakarta.
Saya merasakan ada sesuatu benda yang jatuh. Nah, di situ dalam hitungan detik terdengar dentuman cukup keras.
Apa itu?
Jadi saya menghubungi Jakarta Radio.
Iya,
itu telah terjadi pesawat jatuh.
The crash site, it is about 25 miles from Jakarta seaport. On my way to the crash site, really, I pray to God. I had great expectation that everybody still alive. Arriving on scene, when I saw the debris, the small pieces of fuselage, I lost my hope.
Kalau di dalam, kebanyakan itu hampir sama dengan yang ada di permukaan, karena yang ada di dasar laut, di kedalaman itu adalah potongan-potongan tubuh ataupun bagian-bagian pesawat, entah itu serpihan, kursi.
Presiden Direktur Lion Air Edward.
When news of the crash broke, I immediately flew in from Beijing, where I was based at the time. So the sun has just gone down, and you can see all the police officers along this dock. After arriving in Jakarta, our team headed out straight to the docks where the wreckage from the plane was being brought in. Whether it crashed or what happened, we still don't even know. But these crews have been pulling up and carrying out debris piece by piece. By the next day, the family members of the passengers were gathering and anxiously really waiting for word on whether their loved ones had survived the crash. Among the family members that I got the chance to talk to was the wife of that passenger who took that video of himself boarding onto the Lion airplane just minutes before it crashed. Your husband actually was taking video of the others getting on the plane when he got on?
Yeah.
Yes. Can you show that to us? Well, these are a lot of the other passengers that were on the plane?
Yeah.
Is there still some hope that there are survivors?
Yeah, we do believe that God
and came apart with such force that there was no way anyone could have survived.
Berdoa buat cepet ketemu gitu. Berdoa biar tetap selamat, tapi nggak selamat gitu.
Karena benar-benar saya kerasa kehilangan. Hubungan antara Fiona dengan ibunya ini sangat dekat. Nah, begitu mendengar kecelakaan itu benar-benar down sekali. Benar-benar shock, down. Jadi satu hari setelah pesawat jatuh, mendengar kabar ibu yang meninggal.
Fendi left behind a wife and 4 children, the youngest who was 5 years old.
Jujur ya Bu, suami saya itu kalau naik pesawat itu memang sangat khawatir. Dia itu paling takut kalau naik. Dengan rasa ketakutan yang dia.
737 MAX, it had only 800 flight hours.
But it turns out there was a hidden danger on that plane. A flight control system that Boeing did not even tell the pilots about.
There was nothing in the manuals that alerted the pilots to the existence of this new system that was placed on the MAX.
Pull up.
It has one mission, and that's to drive the nose down.
Terrain.
And it will not stop.
Pull up.
who was given the power to try to kill them, essentially, until it finally succeeded.
Pull up, pull up.
Devastating plane. My first thoughts were, boy, it's a brand new airplane. It must have been bad maintenance, or it must have been pilot error.
A lot of Indonesians initially just saw that this was Lion Air fault.
ABC's David Curley has the story. Good morning, David.
George, the real thing that we need to find are those two black boxes, which will yield a lot of answers to all these questions.
The National Transport Safety Committee found the flight data record.
It becomes clear that something had gone terribly wrong. The pilots are struggling with the plane, almost in a tug of war.
When we found the black box, we found that the aircraft was pitching up and then down, down and up and down and up. It's up and down for about 24 times.
Had you ever seen anything quite like this?
I never knew any case of the aircraft can fly up and down like this. I knew that the pilot was fighting with the aircraft.
It would have been a terrifying roller coaster ride. During that time period, the passengers would have, of course, been hysterical. Things would have been flying in the cabin. Computers, laptops, phones would have been flying around. People would have been screaming.
It was a clear weather, so they could see the sea. And I think it will be very scary for everyone in the cabin to see outside, to feel the speed.
Menit atau berapa itu? Rasa ketakutannya sangat amat.
Swear I won't forget this, why do I regret this? In my mind reckless, thoughts are feeling endless. Sitting up I'm breathless, anxiety's infectious. I feel so defenseless, betrayed and embarrassed. I hate being open, I hate being broken. I feel like an ocean filled up with emotion. Anger ain't a potion, rub it on like lotion. I can feel it soaking, reopen, the scars have awoken. I can't move on till I let go. I feel so lost, never at home. Need to be strong, every breath hold. Cause I can't move on till I let go. I can't move on till I let go. I feel so lost, never at home. Need to be strong, every breath hold. Cause I can't move on till I let go.
Si yakin saat itu dia sangat takut sekali, Bu, dengan pesawat yang goyang seperti itu. Saya bisa ngerasain juga.
When the cockpit recorder was eventually recovered, it was revealed that pilots were rifling through the pilot manual, trying to apparently figure out what to do.
They're turning the pages to find out what the hell it is, why the aircraft is going down.
They start shouting about which procedure should do. They knew that they were having serious problems, and they just screaming the name of God.
That point of time, that only pain he must have felt was the sense of failure, that he's not able to save others, except that he was a brave child, you know.
We surprised. It's very strange that the aircraft doing that way. Then we asked Boeing what kind of system that may create this way.
What Boeing revealed to investigators came as a complete surprise. It turns out that Boeing had installed a flight control system on the 737 MAX that had the power to take control of the plane from the pilots without them even knowing about it. The program was called MCAS.
MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, and that this system, under certain circumstances, can trigger in such a way that it will cause the airplane to nose down.
Why did Boeing put this MCAS system? What was it for? It's a mystery not only for us, but also for the pilot and co-pilot on board the plane.
So the reason they put MCAS on the airplane was because they put these brand new huge engines on an old airframe.
In order to have sufficient ground clearance, they moved the engine further up above the leading edge of the wing and further forward, and that changed the way the airplane flew.
And this effect of the engines came in and the airplane starts to want to pitch up all by itself. The idea was to provide something that would offset that pitching moment or causing the nose to come up.
When the plane computers think the plane is in danger of a stall, so in very basic terms, MCAS pushes the plane's nose down by automatically triggering the rear horizontal stabilizer.
So the MCAS is there to correct what MCAS thinks is wrong.
Right.
The pilots have no idea why this plane is going down against their will,
Yes.
so they try to fight it back.
Yes. One of the most fundamental muscle memory things a pilot knows how to do. If the nose goes down too far, you pull it back and you trim. And this battle goes back and forth a couple of dozen times.
So it was MCAS, it was the computer against the pilot.
Yes, and the way MCAS was designed, it was given the control authority to do it as many times as necessary. In other words, it was given the power to try to kill them, essentially, until it finally succeeded.
Boeing's revelations about the MCAS system and what caused it to activate on the Lion Air flight in the first place would cause an uproar in the pilot community, and it would all lead to a secretly taped meeting where Boeing was recorded telling pilots that MCAS was being fixed.
Those are going to be relatively straightforward software changes that we expect to be done in a fairly short period of time. We want to make sure we're fixing the right things.
But while that was happening, the plane would continue to fly.
They were rolling the dice with the lives of the global traveling public.
Now that urgent safety warning from Boeing about their brand new 737 jets after that deadly crash in Indonesia. Now concerns about a feature that could malfunction, causing planes to abruptly dive.
A week after the Lion Air crash, Boeing issued a safety bulletin to the airlines, finally revealing the existence of a flight control system on the 737 MAX that could unexpectedly force the plane's nose down.
It's an admission by the company that there is a potential glitch in its newest aircraft.
Just a few days later, Boeing tells operators for the first time that there's a new and previously undisclosed system on the aircraft, and that is MCAS.
That was a shock. It's not in our manuals at all, except in one section, our abbreviation section. We didn't know what MCAS meant. It meant nothing to us.
But there was another critical question to be answered. What caused MCAS to force the nose of the Lion airplane down in the first place? The plane was flying normally, so why did MCAS activate?
Among a lot of surprises was that MCAS was triggered by a faulty angle of attack indicator, which is a relatively innocuous piece of equipment on the side of the airplane.
The angle of attack sensor was feeding incorrect data about the angle of the plane's nose.
It was telling the plane that it was, approaching a stall situation, that its nose was pitched up.
So the plane thought that the nose was angled too high, when in fact it wasn't.
And that MCAS needed to come in and push the nose back down.
And there was a further revelation about MCAS that took investigators by complete surprise. Even though there are 2 angle of attack sensors on the 737 MAX, MCAS only relied on one of them.
It's a lack of redundancy that appears to my mind to be unacceptable in airplane design, because the AOA indicator is susceptible to damage. It's not a robust piece of equipment.
A single point of failure hooked to a safety critical system, you just don't do that. It's crazy.
The bottom line here is the 737 MAX is safe, and the safety is a core value for us at Boeing.
Boeing CEO Dennis Muhlenberg went on Fox Business to reassure the public that a bulletin had been sent to all the airlines instructing pilots exactly what to do if there was another emergency situation involving the 737 MAX.
We've already issued a couple of additional bulletins that point them back to existing flight procedures to handle that kind of condition.
So Boeing is telling the pilots that one of their options is to simply turn off the power supply to the electric motor on the stabilizer. That's the, the piece that pivots up and down and controls the nose of the aircraft.
Boeing pointed out that the pilots on that previous Lion Air flight who overcame a mid-air emergency involving MCAS had followed the appropriate procedure by turning off power to the stabilizer. That was a step the pilots on the fatal flight did not take.
And that was perceived to be an indirect way of blaming the airline and blaming the pilots without also acknowledging design shortcomings of the system.
It emotionally tore me apart, as if I was blamed for him being the pilot. I was blamed for killing all the people, mothering a son who could not take care of his passengers.
Pilots were furious. Pilot unions asked Boeing, why didn't you tell us if you put something on the airplane that's going to actually interfere with my job?
Late November, about a month after the accident, 4 Boeing executives traveled to the headquarters of the Allied Pilots Association, the union that represents pilots at American Airlines.
That meeting was secretly recorded by the head of the pilots union.
Our president at the time wanted to make sure we knew exactly what was said.
We flat out deserve to know what is on our airplanes.
I don't disagree.
I don't know that understanding this system would have changed the outcome of this. We try not to overload the crews with information that's unnecessary so they actually know the information that we believe is important.
It enraged us. Boeing always gives you the information. They don't parcel it out.
We're working with the FAA right now to try to figure out what software changes we might make to eliminate the failure conditions that we experienced at Lion Air.
They said, well, we're going to correct the software, all the things that you brought up.
Those are going to be relatively straightforward software changes that we expect we can get out in a fairly short period of time. Weeks, not a year, but a couple, maybe 6 weeks-ish.
The question I have for you is, do you feel comfortable that the situation is under control today before any software fixes are implemented?
Absolutely.
They were taking a gamble with keeping that in the air. They had such a big bet on the 737 MAX. They had staked their reputation, they had staked their financial future on it.
4 months after that Lion Air crash, the 737 MAX is still flying all over the world. Meanwhile, 149 people are saying their goodbyes as they prepare to board that Ethiopian Airlines flight to Kenya. Among them, young Samia Stumo, who had just flown in from D.C. and was transiting to Nairobi for her assignment with her global health care organization.
I guess she had landed in Ethiopia, and I said, "Safe travels," with a bunch of exclamation points, and she said, "Thanks, boo."
We didn't know that there was an issue with the plane. We thought that the problem that happened in it...
Maybe they didn't understand the danger that they were walking into.
Samia, where are you? Where are you, Samia?
Boeing killed my daughter.
Pull up.
We flat out deserve to know what is on our airplanes.
The nose is pointing down, and it's over.
Not a plane there. There was a hole in the ground.
The pilots have no idea why this plane is going down against their will.
Pilots were furious. Why didn't you tell us if you put something on the airplane that's going to actually